Hi, this is Barry, and welcome to the Simplicity Zen Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you could take a moment, hit subscribe, the alert button, and like the video, I'd appreciate it. It helps motivate YouTube to distribute this podcast to a wider amount of random people. If you're watching this or listening to this on a podcast app, you can subscribe to that app. You could also go to our website, which is simplicityzen.com, and sign up for the mailing list there. And I love to hear from people. So if you'd like to email me from there, you can do that as well. Today, my guest is Scott Thorton. He's a longtime Zen practitioner in the Sanbo Zen tradition, where he's an assistant teacher. He has been a student of Ruben Habito Roshi at Maria Kannon Zen Center in Dallas, Texas for 22 years, and now is a member of Mountain Cloud Zen Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He's a musician and a professional psychologist. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you and your wife, you guys just moved to Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a move.
Yeah. How's it moving from a big city to kind of it's not a resort town, but kind of a smaller town?
It's certainly a tourist town and a cultural hotbed. There are few cities that I would say in America that are less alike than Dallas and Santa Fe. But Zen is everywhere. And so, yeah, that's the main ingredient. That's the main continuity. But gosh, I miss that traffic in Dallas. It's just.
I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
I'm kind of obsessed with Mexican and Southwest food. So I really want to go to Santa Fe just for the food, like the Hatch chilies.
Yeah.
Is it pretty amazing?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, they have two kinds of chili. They probably have more than two, but they have two ones that they tout, and one is green and the other's red, and there's very different. And when you go to a restaurant, you say, "Give me Christmas," and they give you both.
Is it very distinctive? The
Yeah,
flavors?
very, very. Yeah, unlike anywhere else I've had chili.
Cool. I'm sure most people subscribe to this podcast for food stuff. So.
Yeah, let's continue.
So your official kind of position is assistant Zen teacher. Could you describe what that actually means in the organization?
Yeah, it's just a kind of step along the way. Assistant teachers don't have a great deal of authority, and we're really basically we can teach people to meditate. We can teach them the forms. We can teach them, the basics about Zen, and it kind of stops there as far as our official capacities. We stretch it a little bit here at Mountain Cloud and at Maria Kannon Zen Center. Assistant teachers and even some senior students are invited to give a Dharma talk from time to time. I've done a few of those. And I've been meeting with individual students, not in Doksan, but just one-to-one kind of meditation guidance, we'd call it.
But you're not offering koan
No.
study. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you still practicing as a practicing psychologist, or are you retired?
I'm still practicing a little. When COVID came along, I quickly converted my hospital practice to a video practice. And didn't think I would like it much, but I actually do. And so it's been particularly convenient when we moved here. I still have a Texas license to practice psychology, and all my clients are from Texas, and all my referral sources are in Texas. So I'm still a Texas psychologist, you could say, and I've got other things to do here. So I'm not really pursuing that professional line here in New Mexico. They've asked me to be the director of the residential program here at Mountain Cloud.
Oh, cool.
So I'm getting that. I'm working that up right now. So that's nice.
All right. So what kind of psychology do you do? Is it like kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, or a little more old school, or?
It's very general. I've been a psychologist for 34 years now. Started out as a Jungian in my heart, there wasn't a lot of that going on where I went to school, and but
Mhm.
it was cognitive and behavioral approaches were um, really the mainstay by that time. But there
Mhm.
was still an old guard of ego ego psychologists, Freudian uh,
Mhm.
psychoanalytic types.
Mhm.
Uh, and my favorite was a Gestalt. My favorite professor was a Gestalt therapist, and so I learned a lot about that and humanism. So I'm a kind of a mixed bag, but basically, um, in the end, I think I probably fall in the school of Carl Rogers. You know.
Mhm. Um, does your Zen practice inform your or not psychoanalytic, but psychology practice, or are they totally different domains for you?
They complement each other a lot. You know, I probably teach about one out of three people I meet.
Hmm.
Probably I teach some kind of form of meditation to for
Hmm.
symptom management or just for um, kind of integrating themselves.
Hmm.
But I think perhaps even more important than that, I think it's a good thing for therapists to be meditators.
Hmm.
Uh, it helps me at least to be more
Hmm.
present and to listen more
Hmm.
accurately and empathically and you know there are resistances to different types of personalities that I have like everybody does and helps me kind of see through that sometimes.
As head of residential practice, am I phrasing that right?
Yeah,
What
residence program. Yeah.
yeah, what are your responsibilities there? What do
Well,
you
we're
do?
still developing it. We don't have any residents yet. There have been at Mountain Cloud in the past, but I guess because of my assistant teacher status and my skill set as a psychologist, they thought I might be a good fit for this kind of thing. So what we're going to do is invite. There will be a maximum of seven residents at any given time,
Mhm.
and they'll stay here for you could measure it in months probably that they would be in residence at Mountain Cloud.
Mhm.
Fairly rustic living situation. Um, and but a step up from camping, but
Yeah.
still there'll be in cabins and
Mhm.
cottages. Um, and they'll basically just have an immersive Zen experience where we'll sit together for an hour every morning and an hour every evening.
Mhm.
And they have Samu, work practice for an hour and a half a day or so. And I'll meet with everybody individually for meditation guidance
Mhm.
once a week or so. And then we'll have group meetings to just for community building, and we
Mhm.
want to interface with the local sangha as well. That's been uh, the sangha around here is hungry for in-person stuff because of the deprivations of COVID.
Right, right. Yeah.
Just starting to come back in the Zendo now, and it's just really alive.
Do you guys wear masks in the Zendo?
We do, yeah. When there's any number of people here, we do. When there may
Yeah.
be three or four people, no, because it's a very large Zendo.
Right.
Um, but yeah, when there are 20 people in here, we're masking up.
Yeah, I'm really struggling with I wear like N95 masks,
Yeah,
and I can do it for a couple of sittings, but and I've done it for multiple days session, but man, it's just so hard for me. I get all stuffed up and I can't breathe, and I'm
yeah.
really
I know.
struggling with it.
Yeah, we're in N95 as well, and uh, especially after Kinhin, and we're at altitude here, and I'm not used to it yet. But after our walking meditation, I'm huffing and puffing, and to put that to sit down with that thing on is hard. You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And plus, it pinches your nose, so you have to breathe out your mouth. But it's just another thing to experience. But
yeah,
it's definitely a physical challenge for me.
yeah.
Um, so the students who come for the residential program, are they going to work with Henry and Valerie as well at Mountain Cloud, or this
Well,
is Henry Schuckman and your wife Valerie for people who don't know?
yeah. They'll certainly interact with them. Um, if anybody gets to the point where I think they're having any kind of experience, any sort of kensho, I'll
Mhm.
definitely bump them up to Valerie and Henry uh,
Mhm.
for to really get their koan study going. But they're going to, in addition to the brief sketch I gave you of their day,
Mhm.
um, they'll also attend all the session,
Mhm.
all all the Thursday night Dharma talks,
Mm-hmm.
Zazen Kai, any kind of special event. Anytime there's an event in Zendo, they're more or less required to be there. It's just part of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to get a lot of teaching from Valerie and Henry that way.
Yeah. So are they put on, you mentioned Kensho, are they put on Moo right away, or are they doing more kind of preliminary following breaths and stuff like that?
Going to be doing more preliminary stuff, but I
Uh-huh.
think I'll have the authority to offer Moo if this aspiration seems right. I'll talk it over with the teachers,
Mm-hmm.
before I do that. Um, but yeah, one could start with Moo, or maybe even a simpler one. What is this, or who are
Cool.
you, or who hears? One of those.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um, so is there a fee for this program? Are
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah. We haven't determined the fees yet, but if you're in the cottage and it's a nicer arrangement, you have,
Mm-hmm.
plumbing, and you have a little kitchenette, and there's a communal bathroom. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're in a cabin, it's a little harsher. So
Mm-hmm.
they have heat, but that's about it, and
Mm-hmm.
electricity. But so we'll charge less for those units than the others. And
Cool.
we're not sure about the price point yet.
Mm-hmm. Um, for kind of younger people who without an income, do you think there'll be any sort of work trade practice, or have you
Yeah,
guys talked?
we have to have a scholarship component,
Mhm.
uh, and everyone will be doing some work, and they'll also get their breakfast and lunch Monday through Friday will be free.
Mhm.
Um, so we're trying to make it affordable,
Mhm.
but uh, obviously there'll be some people who can't even afford the modest prices that we're suggesting. So we'll if it seems like somebody that we really want to have that really could use this kind of experience, we'll try to make adjustments.
It's great. Yeah, I remember when I was in my teens and started practicing. That you know I really look back and really appreciate the generosity of centers that let me essentially go practice for free. 'Cause I didn't have any money.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, like less than zero.
yeah,
Yeah, like yeah. I mean, it was pivotal. So,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah, I've
yeah.
heard of places that actually pay people to be there.
Oh, really?
I think they actually work them a lot, but
Oh,
still.
yeah. I mean, I guess San Francisco Zen Center, you get like well, even when I was I think when I was at Sonoma Mountain Zen Center, I think I got like $20 a month stipend, or, just to buy like toothpaste and stuff.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So, could you talk a little bit about where you grew up and
Mhm.
kind of what that was like and so forth?
Yeah, I grew up in the South. I was born in a little place called Tunica, Mississippi, which
Hmm.
is a very small town close to the Mississippi River.
Hmm.
Uh, and then uh, we moved when I was in third grade to Clarksville, Mississippi, which is a little bit upriver.
Hmm.
Uh, and then in fourth grade, my father got a job in Memphis, so we moved to Memphis, and I spent most of my life there.
Hmm.
Uh, got through high school and college in Memphis.
Yeah, you have no accent at all that I can hear at least.
Oh, good. Thank you. That would delight Valerie to hear that, or surprise her, I would say. Uh, I'm on my best behavior right now when I'm tired or angry or whatever. It comes out.
Nothing wrong with accents, but so um, were your parents conservative or more liberal, or were they
They were
worldly, or
they were Democrats, but that was different back then.
right,
I'm
Dixiecrat?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm born in 1951, just to give you some perspective on that. But they did vote for Kennedy, and they did vote for Johnson.
Mhm.
And, but they were Baptists, and so I grew up in a fairly conservative religious background.
Mhm.
My mother was quite devout, in fact. My father was, polite about it, but they were conservative, but they weren't. These days that means something different. I think they were centrist, I would say.
Were they were you a believer as a child?
Yeah, yeah, I was pretty reverent kid. Um, and in the Baptist church, you decide that you want to be baptized in theory. I mean, really, there's a lot of social pressure to say I'm ready, but it's not a thing that happens in your infancy.
Hmm.
It's more like grade school, and
Hmm.
and um, so I went through that process, but I had a really powerful experience about a week after being baptized. It's like I really felt God loves me. I just had this amazing sense of gratitude, uh,
Mhm.
and I don't go for all that dogma anymore. But that feeling, that sense of the universe loves me is still with me.
Do you think that was kind of a like a taste of Kensho, or
I do, yeah.
yeah?
Or
Uh-huh.
there was a brilliant kind of silvery light that kind of came with it, and I had another one similar to that while in the church one day. We would go to church on Wednesday nights also in a very small group.
Mhm.
People. I was sitting alone in a pew. Before the preacher came on, there was a organ music going on, and there's just that vibration of the big pipe organ got in my body, and that sort of wonderment came again at that
Mhm.
time. I had a
Do,
couple of
do you think there was a kind of shift in identity there, or is it mostly, or was it still a lot of kind of object subject like perception?
That's a great question. I hadn't really contemplated it. As I recall the moment, yeah, I would say I was gone. You know,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's interesting. So I've interviewed Henry and Valerie, and both of very, I think, susceptible to kind of shifts like that. And I wonder if people with that kind of in their DNA, I wonder if they're more apt to like, gravitate towards something like Sanbo that values that.
That's probably the case. I would
Mhm.
say that's probably the case.
Mhm.
I didn't gravitate towards Sanbo myself. It was just available.
What was there?
Yeah. Actually, I'd read Three Pillars of Zen. I'd been practicing on my own for about 12 years, really, really um,
Mhm.
uh, uh, devotedly. And
Mhm.
um, I read Three Pillars of Zen and really got this vivid picture of what it's like to be in Session and Doksan and Kensho, you know, and I wanted that.
Mhm.
And I was talking to my stepdaughter, who is only 10 years younger than me,
Mhm.
and she said, "Hey, I've been trying to tell you, Ruben Habito is right over here. He's right in that lineage." I go, "Okay, I'll check it out." And yeah, it was love at first sight.
Great.
So I just got,
So at your age, you were kind of, I think, perfectly suited for kind of the explosion of many things in the 60s. Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did, were you, I mean, were you part of that, or were you kind of more
Yeah,
straight and narrow?
I was square in the middle of it. I was actually in the musical Hair, uh,
Mhm.
and yeah, I didn't have to act. I was really believing
Mhm.
like every word of it.
Yeah. So were you were a musician at the time?
Yeah, my first before I was a psychologist, I was in theater and
Mhm.
specialized in rock musicals. So
Hmm.
it was like Hair and Tommy, uh,
Mhm.
and I've been playing guitar since I was a teenager.
Mhm. What bands from that time really stood out to you?
I was a big Bob Dylan fan for one,
Mhm.
and I was just blown over by the Beatles and Rolling Stones. The Who, I saw the Who just a few months ago,
Mhm.
uh, and so I like those English guys a lot. Uh,
Mhm.
and then Crosby, Stills, and Nash were influential. I still like to listen to Neil Young a lot. Um, so I was both a folky and a rocker.
Did you ever catch like Allman Brothers or the Grateful Dead or like more improvisational bands?
I never saw them live. Yeah, I certainly listened to them,
Mhm.
um, but I never got to catch them live. No.
How about psychedelics? Were you interested in those at all?
Yeah, I checked that out back then. Uh, we had these sort of street psychedelics that I'm not sure were as good or as clean or as helpful as some of the plant-based things, but I did try that out. And then there were uh, toward my when I was in my 20s, twice I was given some magic mushrooms,
Mhm.
but never in a. It was always in a kind of a conducive,
Recreational.
yeah,
Oh, or what?
recreational, conducive setting. Quiet. I wasn't out in the streets or anything.
Mhm.
but it was not, under the guidance of, a shaman or anything like that.
Wasn't reverent. Or,
No.
yeah. Were any of those experiences meaningful to you, or were they just kind of fun?
Yeah, mostly they were just kind of fun. But I remember once with the magic mushrooms that I did have probably I don't know what to call it when it's drug induced, but a kind of opening experience with that.
Mhm.
You know.
Cool. And so, did you major in psychology or music or both? Or
My undergraduate degree was in theater,
Mhm.
and when I went to the kind of the pinnacle of my theater career was uh, in my mid 20s. I was in New York and
Mhm.
happened to be invited to audition for Hair again and got into
Okay.
production there.
So, like so you were actually a working actor.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Um, but I'd been regional prior to that, and
Mhm.
this was like the first and only exposure to the big time.
Mhm.
And the show closed after about 4 months, and there I was with a wife and two children, and I auditioned most every day, sometimes twice a day, for
Mhm.
various things. I had a couple of agents because of being in the show. So I got to go to a lot of auditions, and I was getting better at it. But the competition there is pretty fierce,
Mhm.
and I started reading Jung and began to see that. First, I was really intrigued. I'd had a little bit of experience with therapy
Mhm.
um, with my family, and liked the therapists a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and practically speaking, it made more sense to become a psychologist than to wonder if I'd ever work again as an actor. So I changed course.
So, do you get a master's, or do you have to go back and get a bachelor's? And
I had to go back and be a non-matriculant. I got 23 hours of undergraduate psychology in order to qualify for graduate school.
Mhm. And this is in New York.
No, we left New York, and rather than go back to Memphis, where the economy was in a shambles, like it was most places, this was 1978,
Mhm.
and there was a big recession going on. Dallas and Denver were two cities where you could work and go to school and still kind of survive. And we had family and friends in Dallas, and it was closer to Memphis than was Denver. So we just chose Dallas and went there. And I'd read about the school that I hoped to get into and eventually did get
Mhm.
into. Um, Actually, in a New York library, I read about the school that I actually ended up going to.
And you so was it hard to establish your psychology practice after after kind of your all the hours you had to do and everything? Was that a hard transition, or was it easy to find clients? Or
I was young enough that it didn't seem so hard. I
Mhm.
don't know if I could possibly do that again.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, it was a rigorous program, and I I was working as a bellhop
Mhm.
while I went to night school, so it wasn't like a high stress job or anything like that, and the tips were pretty good. So I was surviving pretty well. But once I got into graduate school, there was no way to work. So fortunately, my father lent me some money, and my wife had money that she invested in our future by helping me go to school.
And so did you have a meditation practice at this point, or did that come later?
That came a little later. I graduated from school. I mean, I finished school in 1984
Mhm.
and had to work on my dissertation at that point, and finally got licensed. I got my degree in '86, and then I had to do my internship, and so I got licensed in 1988. And the weekend that I sat for my license exam is the weekend I picked up a book by Lawrence Lashan
Mhm.
called How to Meditate.
Okay. Oh, I think I've seen that. Yeah.
It's a little book. It's really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Um, it was out of print for a while, but I think it's back in print now. And he had just a dozen or 2 dozen different ways to meditate.
Mhm.
Uh, and the one that just kind of struck me was breath counting.
Mhm.
So I started counting my breath on a March day in 1988. And so it was very early in my psychology career.
What led you towards meditating? Like what was the appeal to you?
You know, I have two answers for that. One is having just finished this long process of becoming a psychologist, I had one of those moments. It's like, really, this is it?
Hmm.
It just seemed like something was missing.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing is, as an actor, on a couple of occasions, I had to act like I was meditating. In Hair, the lead character comes out to center stage before the show starts, while the band is warming up and the cast is milling around in the audience saying hi and kind of cutting up. But Claude, the character, comes out and sits in meditation for about 15, 20 minutes as
Hmm.
everything starts to, and then the first song starts, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and it all just sort of unfolds around Claude sitting. And so the director said, well, just sit there. And he wasn't a meditator, but he told me to straighten my back,
Hmm.
you know, leave my eyes open.
Hmm.
And, in retrospect, it was meditating. I mean, if you act like you're meditating, you're probably meditating.
Interesting. And so you felt something intuitive with that, or?
Yeah, it's something really, yeah, something connected.
Mhm.
And, I, there was this other thing, it's silly, but there was this other book back in the 70s called A Child's Garden of Grass.
Mhm.
And it was about how everything's better on wheat. So you want to go to a movie, you know, smoke a joint. You want to enjoy your meal, smoke a joint. You want to meditate, smoke a joint.
Mhm.
And so, okay, I'll try that. And so they gave you a mantra by, as I recall, I could be wrong, but I think you're supposed to toke up and then get a phone book and open it up and point to any any part of the book and then look at it, and whatever that syllable was the first part of your mantra, and then you open it up again, and sort of like this. So I got my mantra that way. I actually used that mantra for a good while. I can still
Was
remember
it like Jones, Rebecca, or something?
it. What's that?
Was your mantra like Jones, Rebecca, or something?
Something like that. Yeah, it was like it turned out it was Un, Yeli, Moan.
Hmm.
So three different names with those.
Yeah.
And God, I feel weird. I'm talking about magic mushrooms and weed here, and that is not our path. But that's what was happening back then.
No, I mean it's well, your path was your path. It's what's
Yeah,
led you up to this
you're
point.
right. Yeah.
Um, so did you feel any like? I mean, what was your slide into meditation just kind of like, oh, I'll try this, or did you feel kind of any sort of desperation? I
It
mean,
wasn't desperate. It felt a little urgent, but
yeah.
not desperate. Like I what happened was within minutes I was hooked. I mean, I really had I didn't know the word then, but I had a distinct samadhi my first time I sat.
It
And
is with or without pot.
without.
Okay.
Yeah, I was straight. Uh, yeah, I was just sitting outdoors on top of a pile of bricks to stay away from. I had dogs that were outside, so I got up on this pile of bricks so that they wouldn't be all over me, and uh, started counting my breath. And I didn't miss a day really. Probably meditated for about an hour a day,
Hmm.
then on at least.
Hmm.
And the breath counting evolved a little bit. I didn't have um, the vocabulary for it, but what I was doing was listening to the sounds of the world
Hmm.
and this beautiful kind of experience of not differentiating between what's a pleasant sound or a noxious sound,
Hmm.
just letting every sound um, hear me, so to speak.
Some more like open awareness or even chicken positives.
Yeah.
some degree. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it sounds like you kind of had that solo practice for a long time, and then kind of blundered into, lucky blunder into Habito Roshi.
Lucky blunder. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about your first time visiting there?
Yeah. So memorable. We were staying. We were had our Zendo. We rented a space from a Methodist church
Mhm.
um, in downtown Dallas, up on the second floor. It's a beautiful Zendo. Um,
I'm surprised they rented to you guys.
yeah, yeah. Ruben is a professor of comparative religion and
Mhm.
at Southern Methodist University, so he has a lot of
Oh,
Methodist
okay.
contacts.
Yeah.
Um, they're currently renting from another Methodist church. So yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Um, so there I was for my first sit there. The first time that I was there with Ruben, I'd
Hmm.
gone for the orientation, and so there was a zazenkai, and for those who don't know what that means, that's an all-day sit, yeah, on a Saturday. Um, and I knew I was going to meet the teacher this day, so I was very excited. So I was sitting um, facing the wall, and right where I was sitting, there was a photograph on the wall of some kind with a kind of a plexiglass frame over it, so it was reflective,
Hmm.
a little bit warped. Um, and so they started doing that little ring of the bell for to let the teacher enter the Zendo,
Hmm.
and I could just feel this, hush, this vibe. And Ruben walked behind me, and his reflection in the plexiglass there, that frame, all warped and everything, just exuded so much love. I mean, I was just struck right away that
Hmm.
um, sounds corny, kind of, but I just fell in love with the man from his reflection.
Hmm.
And then I met him that day, and he gave me moo. Um,
In Dokusan. Do you guys call it Dokusan? What do you call the private meeting?
we call it Doksan. Yeah.
Yeah. And what kind of instructions did he give you for Mu? Was it did he
He,
just he told you he told you this little story,
yeah, the
and
dog.
then just told you to focus on Mu, or
Yeah, just focus on moo.
Mhm.
Uh, and I'd read about moo. I'd read uh, uh, the Gateless Gate,
Yeah.
uh, so it wasn't like I was surprised by what he told me. But yeah,
Mhm.
just told me to not to cogitate about what it means, um, but just to intone moo and let that dissolve me.
Did he have you like do it on the out breath? Did he talk about breath at all?
Yeah, that's how I did it, and yeah, it was definitely an out breath. Nowadays, I think I don't know that he would present it precisely like that now. I'm not sure, um, but yeah, it was to hear him intone was just so good.
Mhm.
So that was the the sound I had in my head, I guess, when I was moving.
What was his vibe in Dokusan? Was he like serious and intense, or like relaxed and mellow? What's his Dokusan demeanor like?
He has 2 or 3 gears. Uh, And back then, he used the Japanese gear a lot more.
Mhm.
I call it the Japanese gear. It's like wouldn't look at you, kind of like that.
Mhm.
Um, but his laughter would be booming too if there was something delightful that happened. I
Mhm.
can remember sitting outside the Dokusan room waiting for my turn, hearing that laugh and wondering what it takes to make that guy laugh like that.
Mhm.
Uh, so he could be very warm too. And I've known him now all these years and know him as just a real kind and sweet guy. So when I see the stone face, I don't buy it.
Um, yeah, skillful means, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so did you so was it weekly that that group met?
We met several times a week,
Okay.
and he would do Doksan on Wednesday nights and on once a month on Saturdays, and then
Mm.
session. I couldn't go that often. I went to Doksan basically once a month for many years.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. And would you go to session?
Once a year, I went to a Labor Day session, so
Hmm.
I had, regular but sparse kind of
Hmm.
interaction with him for the first 9 years.
Hmm.
My wife died in 2009, um, and so I had a sudden kind of opening in my life that I filled with Zen.
Was that totally unexpected?
Her death?
Yeah.
No, we knew for a year
Hmm.
she was dying.
I'm
She,
sorry.
thanks. Yeah. She had what's called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis.
Hmm.
Fiber builds up in your lungs, and they don't know what caused it.
Hmm.
Probably a medication that she was taking. But anyway,
Were your kids grown at that point?
yeah, they were her kids. They were my stepkids,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
and they were adults. We had grandchildren by then. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so, but as she was toward the end of her life, the last few months, she told me several times when she was gone, she wanted me to go to the Zen Center, because she knew how much it meant to me, and thought it was healthy and wholesome, and so she really encouraged me to do that. So I appreciate that.
So she didn't sit herself.
She came once or twice, but no, she didn't. She didn't meditate. She was a dancer. That was her practice.
Mhm. Professional,
Yeah,
like ballet or jet
she
or
she was ballet and modern dance was her main thing, and experimental theater.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that how you guys met through the theater scene? So at that point you kind of kicked up your practice and the gear.
Going to every session I could. That's
Mhm.
when I met Henry uh,
Mhm.
back in those days, and that's shortly after that's when Valor and I found each other, and
Mhm.
so yeah, from 2009 to 2014, I just was going to Doksan a lot.
Mhm.
And from that, I got to the point where I was invited to go to Kenshikai.
Mhm.
That's the process of becoming an assistant teacher.
What what kind of threshold do you think you passed that where you started being invited to that? Like what?
Just getting to the end of the Koan curriculum,
I
you
see.
know, I guess I don't know. Yeah, everybody's got different curricula, but we have first we do usually Mu, and then the miscellaneous koans, and then the Gateless Gate, and then the Blue Cliff Record, doing the English names here, and then the Book of Serenity, and then the Light of Transmission. Uh,
Mhm.
then we do the precepts. And by the time you get to the end of the Shoyoroku, the Light of Transmission,
Mhm.
um, you start to get invited to go to Kenshikai.
Do you guys do 5 ranks as well?
Yeah.
Is that the last thing you do? It is after the precepts.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. If you don't mind, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want, but can you talk a little bit about your process of working on Mu and passing Mu and so forth?
Well, yeah, I worked on it for, I think, 2.5 years.
Mhm.
Um, and um, basically intoning Mu on the out breath. Um, my experience of Mu is that it was often like a solvent or maybe a blade
Mhm.
cutting through things that would arise. Um, and there was a vibratory, kind of a physical vibratory experience that I had as well that could be associated with the first jhana, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and it reminded me a bunch of those two experiences I mentioned from childhood.
Mhm.
Sometimes the Zendo would seem to fill up with that weird light.
Mhm.
Um, and then I was at a Labor Day session in um, 2002, and the what happened was it was the last day. It was actually Labor Day.
Mhm.
And, toward the end of the day, um, and I felt this piercing pain in my heart area,
Mhm.
and everything just sort of began to collapse around that. Um, and I felt like I was just going to explode with joy.
Mhm.
and I just kept trying to hold it in, so I wouldn't disturb others.
Mhm.
Um, And when Ken came, I exited and I ran out into we had this, by the time we owned our own Zendo, and we had this beautiful um, um, acreage, all these trees and wildlife and everything. So I just ran out in the middle of that, and everything was so intimate.
Mhm.
I mean, clouds were, you know, embracing me, and trees were dancing with me, and rabbits were teasing me, and so I just jumped up and down for a long time with nature and trees and stuff, and then it was time to stop. The guess you'd call it the Jisha, uh, came out and said, saw what was happening, and said, ah, dancing with delight, yeah, and said, yeah, and so that was my first opening, big.
Mhm. And how did you, so you went to Dokusan. Did you even have to present, or did he just was like, okay, yeah, you're ready?
Um, I didn't get to go to session was over, uh,
Okay.
and this was before I was going a lot.
Yeah.
So um, he had heard about it,
Mhm.
from the the person who saw me, and so he asked me to tell him about it, and I told him about it. Well, yeah, it's very nice. And then so I didn't think much more about it. I knew it was very meaningful to me, and it didn't really
Mhm.
matter much to me, that I had passed Mu or anything.
Mhm.
Um, but I saw him, the next time I saw him, some weeks later, and he said, "I've been thinking about your experience," and he asked me to describe it to him again, and then he started giving me the check-in questions, and
Mhm.
they were just like knocking down bowling pins. They were just so simple. How it is uh, when you're there. And um, so he said, we got to well, I don't want to give too much away because,
Yeah.
then I would have to kill everybody. but
There was one podcast where after it, I went back and actually deleted because I'm like, oh, he kind of gave away a coin answer.
yeah, but I got to that last question, and he goes, with that, I usher you through the gate of Mu. You know.
Um, and so, yeah, so you said that was your first opening. How did the other ones differ in quality and
I haven't had that many. I had another one that was similarly powerful.
mhm.
Uh, in It was in 2010, I believe.
Mhm.
It's right here in Santa Fe. We'd gone to the North American Sanbo Zen conference,
Mhm.
and had a very powerful session. And the the moment that it happened, I'd been I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah,
There,
funny.
okay, there was this moment where I was um, sitting in zazen, and I actually nodded off a little. I had a little dream.
Mhm.
It was a cartoon bluebird came rushing at me, and I kind of woke up. And so I settled back down and kind of nodded off again, and my deceased wife came rushing at me um, in her glory form. I mean, in her dancing days,
Mhm.
her youth, and I was wild, and that funny light started to happen.
Mhm.
And um, later I had Doksan with Yamada Rion. I
Mhm.
told him about that, and he said, "Whoa, your wife actually came here. Your deceased wife actually came here." I said, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. He said, "Well, she's joined the practice." And I thought that was kind of nice. And then some days later, in that same session, um, it was just I sat uncharacteristically. I sat 3 rounds in a row without walking. So I sat like for an hour and a half after having heard a really strong teisho. And it was lunchtime, so I rose to go get in line at the cafeteria,
Hmm.
stumbled or lost my balance and fell up against an adobe wall. And the texture of that wall on my arm.
Was it this center, by the way?
No, we were at the Carmelite retreat center.
Oh, okay.
This center wasn't big enough for
Hmm.
that. Um, but the texture of that adobe on my arm just woke me up, and very similar experience to the one I described before. I went outside, and um, I just wanted to touch everything, flowers, trees, even lawn chairs. I mean, everything was just so perfect and exquisite. And so I think my experiences now, I have a little bit of language for them,
Hmm.
more like oneness. And I don't know that I've actually experienced what I'm hearing people say about goneness, except, when you were asking me about those early experiences, they were a little bit more like goneness, perhaps, for, for a kid. Uh, and I've had little similar things, but for me, for whatever reason, so far, the opening experiences I've had have all come through the sense of touch or the
Hmm.
skin.
Yeah. So the kind of the luminosity and light that you feel in the room, I'd like to ask you about that because I kind of have similar experiences. I had one kind of thing, and then that involved that, and then since then it becomes really easy with sitting.
Hmm.
And for me, it has a real sense of purity. Does that
Yeah,
resonate at all?
precisely that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Just a pure,
Mhm.
um, holy kind of light.
Mhm. Yes, really. It's it's something.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially at sashimi, it gets really intense, like almost like too intense sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started going to the teacher sessions. So what was it like working with koans with him versus Habito, the abbot?
Yeah, the abbot is more demanding, I would say. Ruben doesn't give it away either.
Hmm.
Um, but the abbot has, it seems, very specific answers he's looking for. It's like he gets a new insight into a koan, and he wants everyone around him, that he's teaching, to get
Hmm.
the same insight.
Hmm.
So he'll yeah, I only get to see him once a year or so, for these occasions. So
Hmm.
maybe 2 or 3 dokusan on that occasion,
Hmm.
that week, um, and then a year goes by and see him again. So I've worked on the same koan with him sometimes for 3 years, um, and he's just looking for something in particular.
Hmm.
Ruben, I think is more like open to, oh, yeah, that's a new way to see that, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Even though with the abbot, I've given him sort of presentations to koans that he says that's perfect. Now tell me why. You know, so go back and sit with that.
Hmm. Is he? You said like Ruben had like the Japanese mode. Is he all Japanese mode? The abbot.
Yeah, yeah. He's not even looking at you when you come in.
Yeah.
Looking at his notes, seeing who you are. Oh yeah, yeah,
Mhm. And how does he? So obviously you've been through the koan curriculum. So how's he picking which koan to give you? Is it just kind of
yeah.
almost at random, or?
I don't think it's random, but they are certainly not in any sequence or anything. Like he gave me "Where Will You Go When You Die."
Hmm.
Um, the last, it's the last one he gave me. But
Hmm.
before that, he had given me the one with the cow passes through the window, through the
Hmm.
last window.
Hmm.
Uh,
Why was the tail not go through?
yeah, why won't his tail go through? Yeah,
Yeah.
horns and yeah, legs go through the one with the tail. And I actually, that one took me a couple of years to get uh, the way he wanted it. And um, then I was working with Where Will You Go When You Die for 2 or 3 years. And like I say, I had the answer that he accepted, but couldn't exactly explain that to them. So he took me back to the cow. And this last time I saw him. And I look forward to seeing him again. I think I've reconnected with that one, but I was thrown off guard that day.
Yeah, interestingly, that's one of the koans that Hakuin considered, hard to pass.
Or,
And I think a koan that he would give people towards the end of their practice,
yeah,
to kind of like, okay, like, let's see how deep you really are,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's we just do them in sequence. So that's number I can't remember 28, perhaps of the Gateless Gate, something like that. Um, and so in my first pass through that was in those early years with Ruben, and he said as much. He said this is a very difficult koan, and at that level, a student, they don't really expect you to get the depth of it, and so you can describe what that koan's about um, in kind of cognitive ways or just intellectual ways, and get something out of it. But there one or two of them were like that, where it would be crushing and just discouraging to a student to run up against that koan and never get past it. So we'll pick it up at a deeper level next time through is sort of the attitude, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. So could you describe a little bit like, what have you done, like when you pass a koan, what do you think the shift is for you? What, like, can you talk about a little bit about just a random koan, like,
Yeah.
like what, so do you, do you sit with it, or is it just kind of in the background, or, how do you approach koans?
Yeah. Typically, I sit with what feels like the heart of the koan,
Hmm.
the one line or the one gesture or whatever,
Hmm.
um, that seems to be the heart of it.
Hmm.
And I'll I'll do, I guess, when I sit on any given occasion, I'll recall the koan and then let it kind of drift into the background and occasionally just bring it back. And um, when it shifts, um, oftentimes there's just this recognition, there's just like, yeah, of course.
Hmm.
And I feel lighter
Hmm.
often. Oftentimes, I'm that close and I'll go to Doksan and it'll shift in Doksan, and those are particularly nice. Just feel like somebody's kind of wiped away the crud from your eyes.
Yeah, there's been a couple times where I'll be given a koan, and I'll just have a really quick sense of what,
Mhm.
the answer is, but it'll get time to like close the dokusan, and I'll think like, oh, and like somehow like my brain will like grasp for like a more like conceptual response. I'm like, oh, that's probably it.
Yeah,
And then I'll give the conceptual answer. That's not it. And then I'll do my original answer, and that was it. Like, it's always when I switch at the last minute like that, it's always wrong. And the original one was the right one. It's happened to
yeah.
me like 5 or 6 times or something.
I've had that happen too. Isn't it funny?
Yeah, yeah.
And also those moments where you just didn't hit it. When you're there in
Mhm.
Doksan, and when you're walking out of the Doksan room, it falls on you.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
can't wait to come back.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I get more from the ones I struggle with sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit more of a epiphany, or, a release,
Mhm.
the ones that are just instantly obvious are not,
Yeah.
I don't feel like they do much for me.
Yeah, 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 yeah. If anybody's hating koans, don't despair. Uh, the tough ones really do reward you.
Yeah. I mean, I think hating is part of the fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it put that way, but yeah.
Yeah. So are those the only two teachers you've done koan work with? Have you worked with Henry or even your wife, or?
I'm working with Henry now, and
Mhm.
yeah, actually went to Doksan with Valerie. Ruben's pretty open about it. He doesn't, require you to just work with him.
Mhm.
Um, so there were occasions when Valerie was a teacher for a long time, and before we even knew each other much, I went to Doksan with her a couple of times.
Mhm.
Ruben's wife, Maria Habito, is also a teacher, and I went to Doksan with her once.
Mhm.
I went to Doksan with Joan Reek one time, Roshi.
Oh, that was Henry's teacher, right?
Mhm. Yeah, she substituted for Ruben a few times when he was in Japan for a while,
Mhm.
and I was still working on Mu. I went to Doksan with her one time, and I've been to Doksan with Yamato Rion numerous times,
Mhm.
Henry now quite a few times. Um, there was, yeah, a wonderful woman in Germany named Gudrun, uh, who I've been to Doksan with a couple times,
Mhm.
a Roshi. And there was one other, I think. That's
Mhm.
all I can recall.
Do they all have like vastly different styles and energies? And I mean, I guess it's an obvious yes.
Yeah, they tend to be
Yeah.
pretty different, you know. Yeah, I can hear and recognize Yamato Rion in in Valerie and in Henry, and I can hear Ruben in them sometimes. So
Mhm.
I imagine, you know, if I get to the point where I'm really doing Doksan regularly, I'll
Mhm.
be having to work at not channeling
Mhm.
those people. You know,
So it sounds like you're cycling back through the curriculum,
yeah, mhm.
and
More randomly. You know,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and so so there's the there's Moo, and then the checking questions, and then the miscellaneous koans, and then Gateless Gate, and then Blue Cliff Record. As you're going through the different collections, do you feel like a collection in itself has a spirit or a style that's different than the other collections? If so, could you kind of
yeah,
kind of elaborate a little bit what you see is the different?
yeah. The most miscellaneous are fun. I mean, those
Mhm.
are just those are
Mhm.
kind of a kick, you know,
Mhm.
and they serve a real purpose. They really help keep that momentum going, you know, from
Mhm.
your experience. The Mumonkan, my my adjective for that would be it's warmer.
Mhm.
It has a more friendly feel. Uh,
Mhm.
the Hekigan or the Blue Cliff is a little more austere to me,
Mhm.
um, and you know I don't know if I don't have a strong sense of the Shoyoroku, but the you know, what I'd say about that, I guess, is that it's has this sort of loftiness about it to me.
Mhm.
Um, and then the Dankoroku um, is hmm, it's just kind of exciting
Mhm.
to just see this one master after the other, after the other, after the other get it. You know, just
What what part? Oh, actually, I'm not gonna ask that. Yeah. So like, so what? How do I articulate this? So when you're revisiting the koans, you obviously can't just give it the same answer, right?
right.
So I mean, like, how do you approach a koan you've already worked with?
Yeah, I try to take it fresh.
Mhm.
I can't help it. I look at my notes. You know, just you know, full disclosure. I look at my notes, but I usually
I'm
see.
telling Henry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
uh, yeah, I look at them and I really typically see now that's pretty thin now. I can't go near that. It does help. Go ahead and get that off the table though.
Mhm.
It's like, um, and you know, if I really thought, you know, that was it, then you know, okay, maybe that will end up being presented. But I'll typically re-examine the notes and then basically put them aside
Mhm.
and start working with the koan again fresh. Um, And I think I see things better now than I did then. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to give the same answer,
Yeah.
even if I thought it was right.
So I'm curious. So have you taken Jukai?
Yes,
Who did you do that with?
with Rion Roshi.
Mhm. And was that here's your Bakusu, or was there a ceremony, or?
Yeah, it was Rakusu. It was at Kinshikai,
Mhm.
and it was powerful. He was really really quite the. It was quite a ceremony. Um,
Was this something you guys did in private, or was it with a group, in
it was
front of a group?
there were several of us doing it at the same time.
Uh-huh. So there wasn't an audience; it was just the participants.
No, there was an audience.
Okay.
We were either at Kinshikai or yeah, it was in Europe, so we were not doing NASC. It was a Kinshikai retreat, and so it's the only time I've seen it done this way. I mean, the only time I've seen it at all.
Uh-huh.
But, but there were five of us or so,
Uh-huh.
and he had spent the past number of months doing the calligraphy for the rock suit.
Was the ceremony in English?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you did I take the refuges and do you guys do like um disavow your evil karma and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so did you study the precepts going up? Well, I guess there's the precepts in the Quran curriculum,
Yeah,
but
I
did you
spent the precepts with Ruben, and then so this was more of a ceremony.
but would you study the precepts from kind of a non-dual perspective, or did you guys talk about them kind of more kind of conceptually?
Both. We talked about them in conceptual terms, but also looking at them from the point of view of the essential world rather than just the relative world.
Yeah. And did you get a bloodline? So I geek out on this stuff. I'm sorry, but did you get a bloodline certificate as well? Or
No.
no? Okay, cool. So I'm curious, what kind of demographics are you guys getting at Mount Cloud? Is it kind of an older crowd? Are you getting younger people coming in?
It's a good mix. I don't see a lot of people in their 20s, but everybody looks young to me, right? So uh, do see a number of people in their 30s and 40s and 50s. Um, but there is definitely, a mode of silver dragons here.
Mhm,
We got a lot of old timers with white hair.
mhm. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, those were kind of questions I wanted to touch on. Is there anything you'd like to talk about, or?
Wow, no, this has been a lot of fun. Valerie told me that you had um, uh, been interested in her background uh, as a theologian uh,
Mhm,
in a Christian tradition,
mhm,
and how that compared to Zen. And
mhm,
I liked being able to tell you my childhood stories,
mhm.
and
Yeah.
curious about what was your upbringing like.
Ma- Are you asking me?
Mhm.
Or are you saying okay?
Yeah,
What was my very atheist, 100% atheist. I got baptized in the Catholic Church as a baby,
yeah,
and then no memory of church at all until much later. I went with a friend in college. Yeah,
yeah,
so I was completely yeah, just I thought religion was superstition.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I actually got kicked out of the Cub Scouts for admitting not believing in God.
Oh wow,
Yeah, and I think kicked out of the gifted program in a public school for
man,
saying that because the teacher was really religious.
wow.
Yeah, and then yeah,
Really,
but so I was just I guess you'd say I was a materialist,
yeah. So,
and
so
but then I blundered into psychedelics and the Grateful Dead, and
yeah,
a
yeah.
couple years later I was living in a monastery. So
Wow, what a shift.
yeah.
Um, I've been. Henry was talking about a book. I should know the name and the author. It's kind of current about why I'm not a Buddhist.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh, yeah, what's his name? The English guy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Henry was talking about that book the other day, and um, this kind of convenient separation of Zen from Buddhism in a way in the West, especially,
Hmm.
and and he talked about how even in Japan and in Asia that had been the case, that there had been a kind of like um, not not dis not disengagement, but a kind of a putting it to the side. It's not really emphasized. It makes Zen and Buddhism, for that matter, a little more palatable to the scientific mind or to the
Hmm.
West.
It's funny. I practiced Zen for a long time, not really having any sort of understanding of basic Buddhist concepts at all. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, I was just a Zazen practitioner,
Right.
and so I kind of blundered into priest ordination and stuff too, and everything's been blundering in my life. But and so that teacher, he's really into like turning people into Dharma teachers, like that's his like main focus,
Yeah.
and so I had to like kind of learn all the Buddhism 101 stuff, and it was really interesting how kind of learning like kind of basic like early Buddhism, like sutra type stuff. It kind of I was able to see the path of my practice better as a map. Like like in retrospect, like oh okay, I get it, and I think I even had I don't know if I can fully articulate this. I've never tried to describe this before. Um, I think there would have been some value having more basic Buddhism 101 stuff early on for me. 'Cause I really got sucked into like the jhana experiences, and I think if I had the bigger picture, I would have seen like, oh, this is just a jhana experience,
Hmm. Hmm.
just as one example, and
Yeah.
um, and of course teachers could say that to you, but it's different, like when you kind of have I don't know, but like yeah, I've kind of late in life I've really come to appreciate, especially early Buddhism, kind of the core Buddhist teachings. I've really come to appreciate that in a significant way, which was just not on my roadmap at all for many, I mean decades really,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I get that. I was purely a Zazen practitioner myself. The cosmology of Buddhism, reincarnation, those things just didn't interest me at all, and don't really that much now. But well, the 101 stuff, though, I feel that same kind of need, and I need to catch up with that, especially now that I'm purporting to teach.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, I've become really passionate about kind of the neurobiology of Zen in the last couple of years. Yeah, and I've actually long been interested in it. Um, but the research just wasn't there. It's literally since seems like starting like 2017, 2018, they really started having the papers, the studies that starts really, of course, there's no study that describes what constant, like awareness is. I mean, you know, attention awareness. They know what brain networks, focus it, but they don't know what it is, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I mean, I don't feel it's materialist because there's still plenty of mystery and magic and wonder, right?
Right.
But it's gotten really good at describing samsara, like what is causing the problem. You know what
Mm.
I mean?
Mm.
And it's really interesting seeing that is actually, I'll get some, and I'll read some paper and I'll be like, oh, this is like the 12-step causation. I mean, it's like it's really interesting seeing the correlation between kind of the Buddhism 101 and the research that's coming out. I mean, it totally backs it up. It's fascinating, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can really scientifically explain samsara, and they can intuitively grasp, nirvana, I guess. But
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they have no idea why consciousness exists, and I don't think they ever will. 'Cause I don't think it's a physical process.
yeah,
I don't think it's like. I mean, obviously the brain plays a role, but I mean, there's clearly some thing outside of the brain going on, at least in my opinion. Yeah.
so you can use a phrase like unified field theory
Yeah.
and say that's it, but that doesn't tell you anything.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, the thing about science is that there's an observer,
Hmm.
and the thing about enlightenment is that there isn't. You know.
Hmm. Yeah, cool. I'll send it with that, like, because I think that's the core message right there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Pleasure. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah. So I'll put links to the Mountain Cloud website. People who want to get in touch with you. And so, do you guys have information on the website about the residential program yet, or is that forthcoming?
We had it up for one day, and then the board asked us to take it down because they didn't like the pricing.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so we're going to work on that with the finance committee, and
Okay.
there may be other issues, but we want to get it right. So
Okay.
we had it up for a few hours.
Okay. So, if someone's interested, stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Thank you.